Okay, so let's start then with the introduction. Today we're going to talk about two issues in business ethics, just to see the current situation. So we're going to talk about Enron, and we're going to talk about the subprime mortgage crisis. So first let's talk about Enron. Have you heard the name Enron before? No. No? So Enron is a utilities company. So do you understand utilities? Utilities is like electricity, gas. Do you know gas? Kazakhstan, do you have gas? Yes. So normally this is a very stable company. Utilities company is very stable, right? Almost boring. They get the gas and they provide the electricity for the people. Okay. So a lot of people invested in Enron. So we had normal people bought stock. Do you understand the stock? How do you say stock in Korean? So a lot of normal people bought stock in Enron because it's a very stable company. Do you understand stable? Yes. Do you want to invest in an electricity company? Sounds very stable?
Yes.
If the economy is going badly, are people going to cut their electricity in their house? No, right? It's a necessity, so people need electricity, whether the economy is going well or going badly. But Enron started to change. Some of the old style gentlemen were pushed out, and they got some new staff like managers and CEOs. Okay? And they started to make a different culture in Enron. And they tried to make some quite risky financial contracts. Okay? So they made some risky financial contracts which are a little bit complicated to understand. So we won't get into the detail, but they made like future contract and option contract. So futures contracts is I make a contract for the future. So if I'm buying gas, it means that now it's 2016, right? So I can make a contract to buy gas in 2018. Okay? That's called a future contract. Do you understand contract? Yeah. So they started to make some contracts which was 20 years long. So 2036. Okay? They start to make these kind of unusual contracts. And it's very hard to say what the price of this contract is. Okay? This one maybe is okay because a lot of people are buying and selling gas in 2018. There are a lot of buyers and sellers, so we can decide the price. The market is going to let us know the price. But if we make a contract for 20 years later, there is no market for this. So we decide the price. So this is just one example of kind of risky or unusual contracts they had. Okay? So they made some contract for 2036, and even though the price of gas is changing, they pretend they make a profit on this. Because there's nothing to compare it to. So nobody can say whether Enron made a profit or not on this contract. Okay? So Enron say in their own accounting, this contract is getting more valuable, okay? Even though it's not getting more valuable. So this is kind of accounting tricks. Do you understand tricks?
Yes.
Accounting tricks or creative accounting. So this is one example. Okay? They make complicated contracts that nobody really understands, or it's hard to get the price. And then they use accounting trick to make it look more valuable. So they have more money and more profit. Another thing they did was they made a lot of companies. Like here they have one company, right? And then they make a lot of different companies. It's very complicated. Okay? And then they make a loan to this company. You understand loan, dental? So they have a lot of different companies, A, B, C, and D. So they make a loan to company A, and company A gives them some assets. Okay? And then they do something strange here that makes it look like their company, Enron, gets some profit from this transaction. Okay? But actually they're just giving them the money and they're giving back the same money. Okay? But the way they do the accounting, it makes it look like they made a profit. Okay? That's another example of accounting trick. Okay? So they made these kind of accounting tricks, doing these kind of complicated contracts and long-term contracts that people couldn't understand, and doing some trade, strange companies, and doing some trade with the company and making some profit. So, of course, there is somebody who checks the companies that they're not doing accounting trick. They are called auditor. They are called auditors. So the auditor, they check that the accounts are correct. So in this case, the auditor for Enron was called Arthur Anderson. Arthur Anderson is no longer in business. Okay? Arthur Anderson had a long reputation. Do you understand reputation? Okay, maybe 100 years. But one thing about reputation, it takes a long time to make a reputation, but you can lose your reputation in a very short time. Okay? So Arthur Anderson had a very long reputation, but because of the problem with Enron, they lost their reputation, and then they couldn't work as the auditor anymore. Okay? So they got 50 million of business a year from Enron. Now obviously that is a lot of business, but it's not just auditing. They also had the consultancy. So consultancy was more than half. Let's say consultancy was 30 million. Auditing was 20 million. Okay? Do you understand consultancy? How do you say consultancy in Korean? Consultancy company. What do consultants do?
Advice.
Advise the company. So how do you say consultants in Korean? Consulting, it's the same. Right? Not the same as auditing. But Arthur Anderson, they didn't want to lose this business. Right? They want to keep this business. It's a lot of money for them and all their consultants. So they decide not to check Enron properly. Okay? They say that Enron accounting tricks, they just ignore the accounting tricks. Okay, we talked about the accounting tricks Enron was doing. So Arthur Anderson are going to ignore Mushihara. Right? They're blind, don't see the accounting trick. Okay? Because if they see the accounting trick, they're going to lose. all their business and lose their money. Not just the auditing business, but also consultancy business. Okay, so then this accountancy trick was happening for a few years. So it looked like Enron was making a profit. So the stockholders, the investors, were happy. But there was a big hole in Enron. Actually, they were losing money, not making a profit. Okay, and then just suddenly, the news came out. They couldn't hide. They couldn't ignore the problem or hide anymore, and the company was bankrupt. Okay, do you understand bankrupt? How do you say bankrupt? Hassan? Korean? So if we are bankrupt, so Enron was bankrupt. Okay, then it means that the stockholders lose all their money, and all the workers lose all their jobs. Okay, stockholders lose all their money. So all the people who invested in Enron lost all their money. Okay, would you be angry if you invested your money in Enron? Okay, so we can see the system didn't work well. First of all, inside Enron, they were doing some accounting tricks. Secondly, the auditor also ignored the accounting tricks. Okay, the auditor is supposed to check those things. Okay, so then we had people lost all their money. So that's not very good behavior by this company or by the auditor. And also in this company they had a culture, not just at the top, but even down in the lower area. They were doing some strange behavior, like they would cut all of the power in California. Do you understand? To cut the power in California. And in order to make the Californian government to pay more money for the energy, for the electricity. Okay? So a little bit like blackmail kind of situation, right? So not just at the top, but also at the bottom, they were doing some kind of strange activity in the company. So they had a bad culture in the company. So in this case, the culture was that they didn't worry about ethics, right? They just thought the culture is like, do you know the lion eats zebra culture? Okay? So just, they don't worry about ethics. Just worry about profits. Okay? So they only care about making a profit. They like think this kind of thinking is in the jungle. Some people are stronger and some people are weaker, right? The lion is stronger and the zebra is weaker. So just the strong people can eat the weak people, right? We can make more profit. And we don't have to worry about the other person, right? Does the lion worry about the zebra? Zebra has some children, right? Lion is not worried about the zebra's children. Just worried about himself, right? So then let's watch a little bit of a video about Enron. So there have been some movies made about Enron and books written, and this is the most popular one. It's called the documentary is called Enron, the smartest guys in the room, because they were very smart, the guys working in Enron. Okay. So this is just an interview. Do you know Charlie Rose? Charlie Rose is a TV personality. So he is interviewing the makers of the movie. Okay? And asking them about the culture in Enron and what happened in Enron. So we're just going to watch a small bit of this. So can you just turn off the light a minute? Maybe just leave on one light. Okay, thank you.
Director Alex Gibney and writers Bethany McLean and Peter Oten are here. Their new movie is Enron, the smartest guys in the room. It is a story of how the top executive from one of America's largest companies walked away with over $1 billion, while investors and employees lost almost everything.
So he said that, I'll have to explain, right? He said that the top people in Enron walked away with over $1 billion, right? So the top people got $1 billion, whereas the stockholders lost everything. Okay? The normal people lost everything.
Here is the trailer for the film.
It had taken Enron 16 years to go from about 10 billion of assets to 65 billion of assets. It took them 24 days to go bankrupt.
The fatal flaw at Enron was pride, arrogance, intolerance.
So she says the flaw in Enron was pride. Do you understand pride? Proud. Jashin Gam. Arrogance. Do you understand arrogance? Are you arrogant? Do you think you're the best? Here we can see a quote. A trader in Enron. All the money you guys stole from those poor grandmothers. Right? So even the trader was stealing money from grandmothers. Right? At the bottom of the company.
We can add a gazillion dollars to the bottom line.
All right, that sounds fantastic.
Did you convert stock worth $66 million?
I don't know. I netted approximately $100 million.
Enron is a company that deals with everyone with absolute integrity.
Talking about my compensation, if I step on somebody's throat on the way, that doubles it. Well, I'll stomp on the guy's throat.
This is kind of culture. He says he'll stomp on somebody's throat. Stomp means to step on somebody's throat. If he can get paid more money, right? Will you step on somebody's throat to get paid more money? Right? Well, that was kind of culture, he says, this guy.
The other thing about people at Enron is a lot of them were former nerds. You wanted to be the most popular guy on Wall Street and you were going to do whatever you had to do.
They sought out every loophole they could in order to profit.
So they look for loopholes. Loophole is a word. Like the accounting trick is related to loophole. So a loophole is some kind of hole or place where we can do some activity the other people can't see. Right? So they looked for a loophole. They looked for a way to make money, kind of illegally.
Weren't quite clear.
They could bury debt, they could bury losses.
An industry that was very reliable for 100 years was all of a sudden turned into a casino.
So he said that this electricity industry was very reliable for 100 years, and they turned it into a casino. They start to take a lot of risk.
Those guys could just yank the California economy on its leash whenever they wanted to, and they did it, and they did it, and they did it.
So here they're talking about stealing money from California. Okay, $2 million a day by doing this, turning on and off the electricity in California.
Could I predict a phony energy crisis as a result of deregulation? Yes. Could I predict that Arnold Schwarzenegger would be our governor as a result of deregulation?
Oh, I didn't expect that. How exactly does Enron make its money?
Accounting doesn't get that creative.
I would like to know if you are on crack.
This is the shredded evidence that came out of Enron.
Everyone was on the bandwagon, and it can happen again.
We are the good guys. We were on the side of angels.
It has evolved to the corporate crime of the century.
So he calls the corporate crime of the century, right? So Enron was one of the biggest companies in the US, so very big crime.
I am pleased to welcome them to this table. Did we know the story of Enron? We've talked about that on this program a lot. We've read what you guys have written. How did this become a documentary?
Well, I read the book. I mean, I wasn't convinced it would make a great film until I read the book. And what was so great about the book was that it wasn't a story about numbers, it was a story about people. And the characters were so fascinating.
Yeah.
So he's talking about he's the director, right? Making the movie. So he said it's a story about people, not about numbers. So the problem is the people.
That's right. And also there was a tone to the book that I really liked, which was a kind of darkly comic tone. As sad as the Enron story was at the end, you know, there was a lot that was very funny about it, but the dark humor or black humor is kind of comedy with an undercurrent of moral outrage, and I really liked the tone that Peter and Bethany had in the book.
Yeah. So I mean, so what was your hope when you set out on this project?
Well, right after Alex had read the book, he told us his takeaway, and immediately he saw the Enron story in the same terms we did. He saw it as a story about people, and he saw it as a...
He's the author, the writer of the book, right? So again, she says it's a story about people.
Story that had really an element of tragedy to it. It's a story about really human failings.
So human failing. Do you understand human failing? So we're all human, right? So she says it's a story about human failings. Okay.
Losers here, people who lose everything.
Right,
And so we're losers too.
people on the outside think of it as a story about numbers and just a story about complicated financial shenanigans that you can't understand, and even if you could, you wouldn't want to understand.
Yeah.
And Alex was really able to get underneath that.
So it's a story in your mind. It's a story of what? Other than greed and...
It's a story of all too human flaws, because even greed and arrogance and the things that took Enron down, they're very human failings.
So what human failings does she mention? What kind of human failings? Greed and arrogance. Right? We talked about greed, arrogance. Are you greedy?
And I think that's a real part of the story here.
Yeah. Who's the biggest villain in this story?
So yes, who's the biggest villain? Who's the bad guy? Biggest bad guy?
Well, I think that the culture of Enron is.
Yeah.
I think
So he says the culture at the company.
the culture is what transformed people who were could have been decent people and productive people in a different world.
Yeah, we'll define that.
So he said people could have been nice in another company, but because they were in this company, they were transformed or changed because of the culture of the company.
Culture. These are good people who became somehow seduced by culture?
Yes.
And the culture was?
It was incredibly mercenary. It was deal-driven. It was cutthroat. It was arrogant.
So he's describing the culture as cutthroat. Do you understand cutthroat? Cut somebody's throat. That kind of culture.
We're better than anybody else, and we're smarter than anybody else, and we'll do whatever it takes to get away with things.
And we have no restraints.
No balance, no limits.
So no balance, culture with no balance and no limits, right? Do you understand balance? Yes. And no limit. And he also said cutthroat. Cutthroat is English for very don't care about other people, right? Easily harm the other people.
That's right.
I mean, that seemed to me to be the thing that just kept driving home to me. There is no restraint. We will do what we want.
Right. Well, one of the ironies is that Enron talks...
Spend what we want, earn what we want, buy what we want.
Well, and the upside of that is that anything is possible. The downside of that is you don't stop when you need to stop.
Meaning that you have no...
You don't have the self-limits, you don't have the systems in place.
And pretty soon you're not in control of stopping.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they had no system or limit to help them to stop that kind of thing.
Things spin out of control as they did.
And let's just talk about some of these characters. Skilling. Tell me.
Jeff Skilling is really
So she's talking about the CEO. His name is Jeff Skilling.
the contradictory character at the heart of the Enron story, because he's the guy who created the modern Enron. Harvard Business School educated, worked at McKinsey, just a blue chip background. And he's the guy who made Enron from a company that was a pipeline company, steel in the ground, kind of boring old economy stuff, into this company that was supposedly built on intellectual capital that could trade anything from gas to electricity to pulp and paper. And Jeff was a brilliant guy. People describe him as incandescently brilliant, and he had kind of a Pied Piper quality to his intelligence.
People who would know that, describe it that way.
Yeah, and he had a Pied Piper quality to his intelligence. People were willing to follow him anywhere. But with
You know the Pied Piper? It's a children's story about the guy who plays the pipe. All the children follow him. Do you know that story? So she said he's like that, right? People follow him easily, and he's
all
like
that
brilliant.
came some really dangerous things. He had the consultant sort of love of the idea. He liked the idea above all else, and he didn't really care how the idea was turned into reality.
And the idea was a great trading company. They could trade anything anywhere in the world and be the biggest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
At one time, Enron was the number what? Largest company?
The seventh largest company.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, also Skilling was an interesting character, a very American character, almost Gatsby-like. He transforms himself physically from this geeky nerd into a real macho man. Suddenly, you know, his hair.
You see it all take place in your movie.
It's really an extraordinary physical transformation. I mean, because one of the things that Enron did is they made it up, but they made it up in a very grand way. I mean, it was a grand illusion because it almost became this wonderful movie set of a company. And Skilling very much played the role to the hilt of the kind of macho trader that would take no prisoners in the marketplace.
Do you understand macho? Are you macho? The opposite of macho is like nerd or geek, right? He said the guy changed from nerd or geek to macho. Okay? So macho man is maybe, if you've seen somebody who goes out hunting, you know, hunting, or fishing, outdoor activity, maybe they do a lot of weights. Right? Geek is like just stay in their room all the time. Okay? Maybe very skinny. Right? So the guy changed, the CEO changed physically, he said. Also, from looking like geek to looking like macho.
Yeah. I actually think that we're all now fascinated by what happens in corporate America, and corporate players have become, there's a cult of personality about them, and some say it's on the rise, and some say it's declined a bit, you know, because of what happened to some people that we've all seen. But my belief is that if Shakespeare was writing today, he'd be writing about the intrigue of powerful corporations. I mean, Tom Friedman has a column today about where are the CEOs in terms of doing something good, you know, beyond just making a lot of money. But that's what probably attracted you to do the kind of work you do, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, these are interesting stories of all these larger-than-life things.
Right, this is where the power is.
Power, money, greed, lust, revenge, sex.
That's right, it's played out on a huge scale, and there seems to be no checking. I mean, the interesting thing about business now is that there are very few countervailing forces. So there's so much power concentrated in such few hands that...
Let's talk about this problem that just a small number of people have a lot of power, and there's not much balance. Okay? No checking on the small number of people who have a lot of power.
Some wild things are going on.
Talk about Fasto and who he was and why he and where he is today.
Andy Fasto is pled guilty to committing lots of crimes.
Take a look.
I think Jeff Skilling had a desperate need to believe that Enron was a success. I think he identified with Enron. He proclaimed at one point, "I am Enron."
The other thing about people at Enron is a lot of them were former nerds, and including Jeff Skilling.
Do you understand nerd? How do you say nerd in Korean? Doesn't translate to Korean? You don't have that word in Korean? Like I explained, geek or nerd in the US just means that maybe they don't play, just very skinny, or don't socialize with the other people, or don't do outdoor activities, right? So she said they were all former nerds because they spent all their time studying, right? But they wanted to change.
He'd been paunchy, he had big glasses, he losing his hair, and just...
So here, this is his image before.
Skilling one day kind of woke up and decided to change himself. And he
changed his image to after. Is it the same guy? Looks different? Right. So even in his physical attitude, he tried to change into the macho guy, outdoor.
But he really did remake himself through sheer will and force of personality.
When Jeff got LASIK on his eyes, everybody at Enron got LASIK, so nobody was wearing glasses.
I think Jeff Skilling is really a tragic figure in a classic sense of the word. He's a guy that people describe as incandescently brilliant, but he's also a guy who is radically different than he at times portrays himself. He's portrayed himself as somebody who was very tightly monitored risk. In reality, he's a gambler. He gambled away huge sums of money before he was 20 years old by making wild bets on the market.
You understand gambling? Throwback. So she says he's a gambler.
You have retreated from taking credit.
So then let's discuss some questions with our partner about this. Enron. So we have 3 questions. First of all, what kind of ethical issue was there at Enron? What do you think what kind of bad things were Enron doing? Okay? What kind of culture did Enron have? Okay, corporate is just talking about business. And what effect did Enron, what do you think? This is the last one is what do you think? What effect did Enron's failure have on stakeholders and society? Okay, so discuss these questions with your partner. Well, that's a good question. So in the class we're going to use the class discussion way, right? So it means discussing with your partner means you ask them the question, right? So you ask her what ethical issues were there at Enron, okay? And then she gives her opinion. She says like Enron did some bad accounting tricks, right? And then she can talk about the Arthur Anderson, and then you can add something else. Yes, and there was this too, right? So you have a discussion like that, okay? And you can say, what do you think? What about you? Okay? So just discuss with your partner about that situation which we talked about, right? So you can sit next to him, right? You can sit next to him. So in the class, try to sit next to somebody. Okay? So you can discuss together. Can you sit up here? Can you sit here? We have to sit next to somebody so that we can discuss.
다혈 경제 먹느냐 먹히냐 I see some people are writing the questions. You don't need to write the questions, right? If you want, you can write the answer, but anyway, it's just oral. You can discuss, you don't have to write, okay? But this is on the website, so you don't need to write down the questions.
Can you check your name?
정전을 시키면서 어떤 일이 있을 거 아니에요. 전부 무슨 얘기 했었나? 올라가지고 스닝하는 거
Okay, so let's start with the first one. So number one, what kind of issues or problems was there at Enron? Accounting tricks. So we saw some examples, right? So what would we call? What kind of adjective would we use for this?
Adjective.
Yeah, what kind of adjective to describe that kind of behavior? You can call that like fraud. Do you understand fraud? Fraud is like dishonesty or fraud, right? Anything else? You saw gambling, right? Gambling, very high risk taking. Right? Taking a lot of risk, gambling. What about Arthur Anderson, the auditing company?
They hide the income. They just ignore accounting tricks.
They just ignored it, right? So they were just hiding, right? Maybe you could see they had another interest, right? So they had a conflict of interest is another problem. So we have different interests, right? On one hand, we want to keep our consultancy business. It's very big money. And on the other hand, should we do our job correctly? Okay? So then what kind of culture what kind of adjectives did we hear about Enron? No balance. What else? No limits. Anything else? If Enron was a person, what adjectives was used to describe, like human failing?
Crucial. Crucial.
Crucial? I don't understand.
Greed.
Greed. Arrogance. Pride, like arrogance, right? Gambling. We saw that it was described as cutthroat. Okay, the employees would step on each other to get a better salary or move up in the company. Okay, and then the last question. What do you think? What effect did it have on the stakeholders and society? So stockholders lost their money. right? What about other people?
Blackout.
Blackouts. So blackout means no electricity, right? When the electricity company closed down, customers are affected. All the stakeholders are affected, right? Suppliers, creditors, people who lent the money. They're all getting bad effect. Okay? Stockholders maybe biggest effect. So we can see that if we have this kind of unethical behavior, right, and the wrong type of corporate culture, we can get the bad results for most people, right? Also, the CEO went to jail, okay, and the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, also went to jail. You understand jail? Kamok? But they also took a lot of money. They also got a lot of money. Or they got away with a lot of money beforehand. And some other employees, we saw one guy there who said he got paid 100 million, right? Do you want to get paid $100 million? How much is $100 million in Korean money? Shibak is 1 million. Chonak? Chonak, do you want to get paid Chonak? You don't want to get paid Chonak? Why not? Too much? So they got that kind of payment. We saw one guy in the video, right? Some of the top manager. So although they get some benefit, the society and the other people can have a problem. So it's clear that we need to put a system in place. They had no system here, right? We need to have a system in place to stop those kind of things from happening. And that's not just the legal system. We can make regulation, laws, but can we make laws about everything in the world?
Sorry?
Can we make law about everything in the world? Do we have one policeman for one person in the world? One policeman to check what he's doing all the time? And he's not following him around? Oh, you put chewing gum on the street, arrested. Right? Do you use chewing gum? Chewing gum? Do you ever throw on the street?
No.
Never? Why not? Yeah, why don't you throw on the street? It's illegal, but maybe you won't get caught. If you put chewing gum on the street, are you going to be caught? Or not caught? What do you think? Is there a policeman following you all the time? No? So you're not going to get caught, right? So why don't you put the chewing gum on the street? You're not afraid of getting caught, right? So why don't you do it? You don't know? You're going to start doing now? From today? You'll start putting chewing gum on the street? Why not? But why?
Just throw them on the street.
Okay, so you don't want to make the street dirty, so you have some kind of moral philosophy, right? You don't want to damage the street or damage the things, right? So that's kind of ethics, right? You think it's wrong. It's the wrong thing to do to put on the street, right? So we have to develop not just the laws and the regulations, but also the ethic inside the business, okay, and the workers' ethics in order to improve. Okay. So do you have any question about Enron, the case of Enron? No? Okay, then the next part we'll talk about the subprime crisis. So we can take the break a little bit early and for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about the subprime crisis.